Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 15th installment of Chaos Under Heaven. I am your host, fellow traveler, and today I am joined by nobody. Unfortunately, Jason couldn't make it. There were some news stories and current events that I wanted to address and have commentary with him on. I tried contacting him on Twitter a couple of times, but tragically he was not able to make it. So today I've decided, instead of not going live, because what's the fun in that, I decided instead it would be cooler to change the nature of the stream. So instead, I'm going to be addressing a interview on a show called Bad Faith, which is basically a podcast started by some ex-Bernie staffers. I do not know their name, but they were debating Noam Chomsky. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and review that. Yeah, like I said, Jason is sadly not with us here today to trigger and own the libs, Le Epic style slam dunk. But I do want to address some of Chomsky's arguments, because I think the big issue with Chomsky is really just his defeatism. I think after years and years of being disappointed, well, I mean, that and I think he's also been kind of swallowed by the status quo, because when you're just a part of intelligentsia, like bourgeois intelligentsia, just being involved in those cliques and those circles and just in general being a part of that apparatus, I think that it does take its toll on your psyche after a while. And not only that, but he's also spooked by anarchism. Otherwise, I don't necessarily dislike Chomsky. I mean, I kind of do. He's hit or miss for me. He's right on some stuff. He's wrong on others. But from what I know of him, he's a linguist first and a political scientist second. But anyways, I downloaded the interview that he had. Let me dig it up. All right. I downloaded it. I'm looking for it now. Let's see. Here we go. I think I found it. Cool-a-rooney. So I'm going to speed it up. Let me see if I can speed it up, because I downloaded this, and I'd like to play it faster for you guys, because we're working on kind of a limited time crunch. All right, we'll go ahead and screen share, whatever.
A simple question. Do you want your grandchildren to survive? I think the people you're talking to say, yes, I want my grandchildren to survive.
So many people's grandchildren are already not surviving. That's the issue.
Yes, you want to ensure that they'll live underwater or have a chance to survive.
So many people aren't thinking about living underwater because they're incarcerated or they're unhomed.
Then as an activist, your goal is to get them to think about it, because that is what is at stake.
So that was a clip of the upcoming interview Virgil and I did with Professor Noam Chomsky. It was a wild ride. What did you think, Virgil?
I think we won the debate.
They think they won, but I feel like they could have made better arguments. We'll go ahead and skip ahead a little bit, but the gist of what Chomsky's saying here goes something along the lines of, do you want your children to live past the age of 50? Well, you're just going to have to vote blue no matter who. You know, I mean, just typical, just the politics of a defeatist, the politics of a coward, which reminds me, I'm going to have to change the thumbnail for this stream, because I don't want to mislead people thinking Jason's going to be here. But anyways.
To us, and
even after listening to Marianne, are just now going to vote third party after hearing how badly Professor Chomsky did against the two of us. And also, you say we're not academics, but we do host a podcast, which honestly,
against Trump.
Oh, here's where he starts talking.
He was deeply respected, obviously, for both your scholarship and kind of your political opinions over the course of time. And so it made big news, understandably, a few months ago when you came out very strongly advocating for leftists who at the time were, many of whom were very frustrated by the way the primary season ended, to pledge their votes to Joe Biden.
Yeah, no, Chomsky did say that. Chomsky said that Lenin was right-wing and that the Bolsheviks were radically anti-Marxist and they took power in a coup undemocratically, which is absolutely not true. They had like the overwhelming support of the peasantry. Total fucking bullshit. And I think he even like tries to take what Lenin said about the USSR being state capitalist. People will do this. They'll like quote Lenin and say, see, even Lenin said the experiment was state capitalist. But the state capitalist phase was a very brief point in time. I mean, socialism was built during the first 5-year plan. So, yeah, no, Chomsky, like I said, Chomsky's hit or miss. He's good when criticizing foreign policy, but he has no solutions. He's not really as much of a radical as people think. I believe that he actually was against the civil rights movement at first because it wasn't popular at the time, and he thought that, you know, that the people at the forefront of the civil rights movement in the 60s should have taken a more reformist approach and should have been more patient, and that they were being too radical. So, I mean, who is Chomsky to say that our line is right-wing when he's literally telling people to vote for Joe Biden?
No, I didn't say it.
Okay, can you clarify then? What is your position?
What I said is 1,000 times, as loud as possible, you should vote against Trump. Now, it happens that there's a technical fact which says when you want to vote against Trump, you have to push a lever for Biden. But the left doesn't get involved in these games. The idea of making elections the be-all and end-all of politics is the mainstream conservative idea. The idea is politics is supposed to be restricted to electoral extravaganzas. You show up every couple of years and push a commitment, in this case, the ignorant and meddlesome outsiders, the public, have to be put in their place. They have a role to show up and vote now and then.
Yeah, so one of the things that he says during this is that if you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for Trump. That means even if you're not voting at all or you're defaulting to the third party, then you are inadvertently helping Trump because you're not helping Biden. But that's not really the way statistics works. Like, any individual person is 1/300 millionth of a country. So that's sort of like saying, you know, you're a bad person if you don't give like $1, like your last dollar, to a homeless guy. I mean, it's the math doesn't add up. You have a neutral position, not voting, and then you have a negative position, voting Trump. Well, you have position A, B, and C, B being Trump, C being Biden, and A being like not voting, and D can be third party or whatever. What I'm simply saying is the math doesn't add up. Just because you're not voting for Biden doesn't mean you're voting for Trump, because that support isn't going to Trump either. So mathematically, logically, it doesn't make any sense. And if your argument is, if everybody just fell in line and voted for Biden, you know, we could stop Trump. I mean, and like I said, mathematically, it doesn't work out. And the presupposition is that people have an obligation to vote for Biden, like a moral obligation. Like, we have to do this out of morality. Like, okay, so while we're on the topic of morality, I'm just going to tell you guys right now, I'm going to do the moral thing and support a candidate that actually like supports my values. And that if the Democrats win, or if the Democrats lose, I mean, it's because they're that fucking terrible at attracting attention. This is the whole point of electoralism and campaigns. The iota rests on the shoulders of the Democrats to appeal to their constituency, but they have all but abandoned their labor, their working class base decades ago, and that's not about to change. But yeah, no, it is just blaming the individuals. This is straight up victim blaming. Like, we've got to be complicit in this system. Like, this is what I'm talking about, man. Like, these people that say shit like this aren't really radical. I mean, Bernie Sanders, let's talk about the Bernie Sanders campaign briefly and the historical role that Bernie Sanders has squandered in our movements. Bernie Sanders had an important role to play in our movement That is to say, to re-spark trade union consciousness, class politics, and so on. And he almost had it. With his campaign infrastructure and the hundreds of millions of dollars that he raised in donations over the course of his campaign, he could have taken that money and funneled it into the Green Party. He could have started his own party. Like S4A and I talked about this. Like Bernie Sanders could have kept fighting, but instead, like, he capitulated. He capitulated to Hillary Clinton in 2016, and he capitulated even faster after the fucking Super Tuesday coup done behind the scenes, orchestrated by Barack Obama. He didn't call it out. He didn't call it the electoral fraud. There were people banging on his doorstep trying to tell him to warn people about this, about the fraud, about what was actually going on behind the scenes, but he just didn't do it. And as it turns out, like as Chris Hedges talked about, it's because he didn't want to be nadered, so to speak. He didn't want to become a political pariah, which means Bernie Sanders' political connections and being an insider and being friends with the establishment matters more than the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. Guys, what do we call somebody who cares more about their own political clout and their own political career than and that they're willing to do anything possible to secure that political career at literally the expense of everybody else and at the expense of their own principles? It's called being an opportunist.
Period. Now, the left has always taken a very different view. Real politics consists of constant activism. Every once in a while, an event comes up.
God, I wish I had the link to this on YouTube. He talks so fucking slow. Jesus Christ. Parenti's like the same age as Chomsky, and he doesn't talk this slow. He's still pretty sharp. Chomsky just talks like a fucking androgynous robot.
In which you have to take a couple of minutes to decide whether it's worth pushing the lever to keep out someone who's truly dangerous. So if in this case, the argument for that is simply overwhelming. It's the most dangerous figure ever to appear in political history.
That's right, guys. Trump is literally Hitler. Trump is literally Hitler.
Proceed back to real politics.
Trump is literally Hitler, guys. He's the worst, most evil human being that we've ever known in U.S. politics. Let's completely ignore the fact that Donald Trump is a byproduct of a series of policies that were continued throughout the Bush, Obama, and Clinton administrations, and that Donald Trump is nothing more than the logical continuation of policies established decades ago. Policies, mind you, that Joe Biden himself helped to set up and establish. No, let's ignore that completely. Let's ignore the conditions that produced Donald Trump in the first place. Now, let's just say orange man bad, vote blue. This is your brain on liberalism.
Which is the constant activism, which in fact has pushed Biden's program to the left of any of his predecessors. And if it continues, can go more. But the principle is vote against Trump, then challenge Biden.
I will vote against Trump, and I will challenge Biden, which is why I'm going to be voting for the PSL if they're on the ballot in my state, and if not, I will default to the Green Party candidate, Howie Hawkins. And I encourage you guys to do the same.
Well, I think the argument that's being made by some...
A proposal, which was the pop
against Trump, right? We're talking exclusively about votes for Biden. So I guess the question is, why...
Now let's try to be serious about it. To say there's an argument that says by joining the 50% of the population that doesn't vote, I'll somehow influence the Democratic Party. I think that's a pretty long shot.
Yeah.
There's another, yes, a very long shot. They don't pay attention to the 50% who don't vote. There's another proposal, which is say, keep the activism going, compel the program to move to the left, as was done, and then vote against Trump and vote and challenge Biden.
Okay, so here's the issue with this. We can move them left, guys. We can move them left, guys. The issue with this is that activists have been trying to do this for decades, but functionally all the results have been is the Democratic Party reining in the truly revolutionary fervor, the truly like activist fervor, like the progressive fervor of, activists, and bringing that into the hegemony of the Democratic Party and co-opting that messaging and basically defanging it and declawing it so that it doesn't pose any threat to the status quo whatsoever. Who would have thought that a system that is designed specifically to perpetuate ruling class, like the capitalist class, who would have thought that that very system is designed in such an efficient way to protect their interests over everybody else's? So it logically concludes, you could see this with the Jesse Jackson campaign and how Jesse, you guys want a little story real quick, little story. Are you guys familiar with Jesse Jackson? Well, anyways, Jesse Jackson he was a Bernie Sanders before Bernie Sanders. He fought for black rights, fought for minority rights. He was in favor of single-payer health care, living wage, jobs guarantee, and so on. He was Bernie Sanders before Bernie Sanders, and he ran throughout the 1980s. All right. Well, Jesse Jackson never won. And every time he lost the Democratic primary, he would default and capitulate to the nominee. And you can see the very same behavior with Bernie Sanders doing the exact same thing in 2016 and 2020 during what is of course like the Super Tuesday coup, as well as a pandemic primary, which really shouldn't have gone on. What really should have happened is the primary should have been put on the back burner, but instead they decided to run with it anyways because, as it turns out, you can drive down voter turnout and participation during the first half of the pandemic. But anyways, long story short, progressives have been trying the strategy of trying to change the Democratic Party from within for decades, and it's gotten literally nowhere because it is not within the material interests of the Democrats to go more left-wing. It's only in their interests to stay just like a step to the left of the Republican Party and, just be nominally better enough to where they don't really have to try to get their vote. It's just sort of like assumes that they're better because they're the lesser of two evils. And as I will explain later, lesser evilism is literally the politics of a coward. But anyways.
Keep pushing it to the left. These are two strategies.
Bullshit. The Democrats have been marching right for decades, dog. You ain't pushing them left. We need to organize outside the system, not within it.
Okay. But in neither case is it a matter of voting for Biden. It's a question of which strategy you use to push the party to the left. One is, I'll keep quiet. The other is, I'll get engaged, the way the Sunrise Movement was, the way the Sanders campaign was, and succeed in pushing the program considerably to the left. In fact, the actual program on crucial issues, like, say, climate change, despite the resistance from the DNC, turns out certainly be better than any predecessor and not too bad and can be pushed further. So those are two tactical choices about how to move the program to the left, in my view at least.
It's not going to work. We're already starting to see this strategy not work, guys. The DNC, or the Democrats, Biden's campaign dropped ending fossil fuel subsidies from its platform. Kamala Harris has tweeted, Joe Biden will not bring an end to fracking. At best, you're going to have Obama tier reforms where there's a little bit more investment in renewables and green energy, but the fossil fuel industrial complex is not going to come to an end under Biden. They are not going to give up their record profits. Like, do you guys really think fucking Biden and his people are really going to challenge the fossil fuel industry in the ways that it needs to be challenged in order to get them to capitulate? Well, the answer is no. And just to let you guys know, we're already pretty fucked on the climate question. I'm sorry, but we're locked in for 2 degrees warming, Celsius warming by the 2050s, and then 4 to 8 degrees Celsius warning by the 2100s. So to put it mildly, we're pretty fucked. Even if we were to stop climate output or CO2 output now, if we were to stop it now, we would still have done permanent damage to the environment, the ramification of which will not be seen for decades to come. Even if we were to drop our CO2 or carbon footprint down to absolute zero today, if we were to stop today, the ramifications of our actions will be felt for decades to come. Well, they won't be felt for decades to come. You guys know what I'm saying. But anyways.
The advantages of the tactical choice of constant activism are overwhelming. Keeping quiet has no effect.
Well, I think that I agree with that, absolutely. And that no one I know is really advocating to keep quiet. It's a
Her choice is.
I'm just going to skip over the parts where
Sunrise Movement.
this lady's talking.
Well, let's take
Oh, yeah,
that
Joy
position.
Gray.
Suppose you're
Anyways.
one of these people. Do you intend to vote against Trump on November 3rd?
Conditioned on whatever terms.
Not conditioned.
Whoa! You just made a very good point, Arnold de Leon. Biden literally said that he will not back the Green New Deal and doesn't want to ban fracking, yet these dumbasses think he is. They also think he's going to implement single-payer healthcare and actually follow through on his campaign. Like, guys, we don't even need to take it that far. Let's assume Biden did say that he would implement a Green New Deal. Let's say that he would raise taxes on the wealthy and implement some Bernie tier style reform and invest in nuclear. You know, let's say he would actually do these things, or he says he will. Presidential candidates are under no legal obligation to uphold their promises on the campaign trail. What this means is that there's really no incentive, because for one, he says he's only running for a single term. It's not like he's at risk of getting, voted out of office after a certain point. Biden's only going to be a one-term president, So besides that, there's really no incentive, because one, also because he takes money from the fossil fuel industry and from Wall Street. Joe Biden, fucking status quo Joe, nothing will fundamentally change Biden. Go vote for somebody else, Biden. Nothing is going to change under him. That's the thing. Politicians lie, guys. Politicians don't tell the truth. They're not honest. Anyways.
Suppose that your demands were not met. Would you vote against Trump?
Then no, there's no persuasive value. There's no leverage if the vote is unconditional.
You wouldn't vote against Trump.
No, in this scenario, yeah.
Right, which means you would help Trump win. Because not voting for one candidate, not voting for Biden, is equivalent to putting Trump one vote ahead. So your choice is, okay, I want, I'll put Trump ahead. I don't think that's a wise.
So people are asking Biden to do things that are electorally beneficial.
Hold on a second. Sorry, guys.
Fucked up.
To support
Also, that's not the way it works. Absolutely not. That is not how the math. So wait, hold on. If I vote for Donald Trump, does that mean Donald Trump is getting 2 votes? Because not only am I not voting for Biden, I'm also voting for Trump. So does every vote for Trump count as 2 votes, which means I have twice the voting power if I vote for this candidate? I'm sorry, but the math does not work out, and this is just straight up capitulation.
policies like the Green New Deal that overwhelm IPCC goals to
What I want, I'm going to help the worst possible candidate into office. I think that's crazy.
Well, what is the consequence? What are the long-term consequences of everybody on the broad left, Democrats, liberals, everyone, saying that under any circumstances, we will vote for a Democratic candidate as long as they are incrementally better than the Republican candidate? Does that way of thinking contribute to the rightward shift of the Democratic Party over years? And what mechanism will ever stop that shift if we're not willing to ever, under any circumstances, leverage our votes?
So what you're saying, if you think it through, is We should help Trump win because maybe in the long run, that'll affect the Democratic Party. That's a terrible choice.
Okay, dude. America has survived one term of Donald Trump, and it has survived term after term of Republicans shifting the Overton window further to the right. I don't really think we have much to lose at this point when there's a literal economic collapse and pandemic underway. All right? I really don't think we have much to lose. To think Trump is responsible for the woes of the American people in this day, right now is great man theory. The crash was going to happen anyways. I will concede the Democrats probably would have handled the pandemic situation better. I definitely think they would have handled it better, but I still think they would have botched it, as well as the measures needed to combat the economic crisis. Because as you can see with the floundering going on in fucking office right now, like the Republicans and Democrats can't even cook up a new stimulus bill to pass to all the impoverished, unemployed, suffering American masses. And when they do cook it up, it's just going to be like a month's worth of money that's going to go back into the hands of the bank anyways, because people are just going to use that money to pay their rent, which is going to go straight to the landlords, and they're going to pay that on their mortgage for their properties. So the money will inevitably go back into the bank. The $4 trillion in stimulus from the CARES Act went into the hands of the bank, and then the $2 trillion, not even a trillion. They didn't even give us $1 trillion. We got like $250 billion, and that money ended up in the hands of the bank as well. So what I'm trying to say here is, yes, we should try to leverage our vote, because that's the only way we're going to get any concessions, not by fucking sitting here trying to capitulate to the Democrats and try and vote shame anybody to go along with it, to just stay complicit in the system. That's how politics works. You make moves. You play the game. All right. You hold their feet to the fire in this regard. Say that you will never win another election again unless you capitulate and support our causes. And the only way you're going to do that is if you throw your weight behind a third party. Like, I know for a fact the Democrats were scared fucking shitless of Ralph Nader. To this day, they blame Ralph Nader for their losses. They blame Ralph Nader for the loss of John Kerry and for Al Gore. They are still butthurt about that shit. They were fucking terrified. And that is exactly what it's going to have to come to, because change does not happen when you just fall in line and support a bourgeois crypto-fascist party with a human face. Change comes when people get organized from the bottom up and form like a legitimate threat to the status quo. You want to know why Franklin D. Roosevelt happened? It was because the alternative was an American Bolshevik revolution. All right? That's why we got Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was a concession. We get concessions when the alternative is revolution. That's how we get hard concessions, and that's how we get them to listen to us.
Helping Trump win, as you're proposing, would mean 4 more years of destruction of the environment, getting possibly to tipping points, which would be irreversible, certainly making any effort to deal with it very difficult. It would mean stacking the judiciary with young, ultra-right lawyers, top to bottom, so that nothing would be possibly done for a generation, and I can go on and on. I don't think that's a wise choice, just on the hope.
Okay, so on this point of the Supreme Court, people, I've heard rad libs, not going to name any names, because like I said, I'm not going to talk about this individual anymore on my channel, but I've heard rad libs, not just Pink Man with a man bun, but I've also heard Pig Man, and I've heard these other rad libs make this point about the Supreme Court justices. Like I said, not going to name any names, but listen, guys, fuck the Supreme Court, all right? The whole system is rotten to the core and just needs to be fucking taken down, all right? Like, even if you've got liberal Supreme Court justices in there, they are
just as likely to shoot down any genuine left-wing proposals as the right-wing Supreme Court justices, because as it turns out, whether they're crypto-fascistic or neoliberal or like fascist judges, they all serve private property, and they all serve the interests of private property. So maybe for minorities, things might get nominally better on issues here and there, but unless we actually address the class society that's leading to a lot of the problems that are arising in the first place, in other words, we're going to need like a genuine populist revolutionary movement. Unless we get something like that and bring class politics back into the discourse, it doesn't matter whether they're conservative or liberal judges. Who the fuck cares? Who gives a quarter of a fuck about these Supreme Court justices? Like, honestly, in packing the Supreme Court. America is like literally an imperialist, colonial, like settler colonial white supremacist project. The whole goddamn thing just needs to be torn up from its roots and replaced with a system that actually gives a fuck about people.
That maybe sometime in the long term, the Democratic Party will pay attention to the fact that you're part of the 50% of non-voters. I think that's a very poor judgment.
That's not what they're saying at all. They're saying you actually build like with third parties that actually represent working class interest. Like like I said, Bernie Sanders failed in fulfilling his historic role as a person to bring class politics, or at least trade union consciousness, back into the discourse. So it's up to us to come up with those same resources on our own. And if Bernie Sanders was able to do it in 2016, bring tens of millions of people together to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to back his campaign, you can do it again, and you can do it again in the context of a third party, but it just requires us to get organized from the grassroots. All right?
I take that very seriously. I take the multi-generational threat very seriously.
Yeah, because the thing is that the left has been in a rut for decades. The fall of the USSR has been a massive blow to the left. You know, the event that Chomsky here thinks was a good thing. Because now we don't have a state capitalist regime saying that they're socialist, yada, 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 you know? Chomsky thinks the fall of the USSR was a good thing. No, it fucking wasn't. We're living in the era of blackist reaction right now, guys. And it's going to take us decades of activism and like work on the ground in order to build up what we had many a year ago. We're basically starting and building everything back up from nothing, all right? There's absolutely nothing about falling in line and being complicit in America's march to the right, just to more neoliberalism, more austerity. Oh, I got to choose between taking a $10,000 pay cut on my job and a $5,000 pay cut. Oh, I got to choose between whether we have 100,000 people murdered in a regime change war or 90,000 people murdered in a pointless regime change war. You know, I gotta pick whether 50,000 people are jammed into concentration camps or 49,000 people are jammed. No, fuck that shit. No, you are being complicit in the system that is oppressing you just because you think you can you think you can maybe someday get like minor concessions from the Democrats if you fucking kiss their toes and suck their dick hard enough. Fuck that, dude. There's nothing revolutionary or radical about this at all. Like, even from the standpoint, oh, well, maybe we can do immediate harm reduction. But at what cost when the Democrats of today are going to be... I mean, the Democrats of today are functionally Republicans from decades ago. All we're doing is facilitating this nonstop march to the right. So we may as well actually rise up and challenge the system in some meaningful capacity rather than staying fucking complicit in the downfall of humanity, basically. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get my camera going. Okay, cool. Do we have the camera going? All right. All right, cool. We've got the camera going. Awesome. And it's off center. All right, where were we? Let's do this.
as a Black American whose privileges more recent right now, it is a lot of
is help
to maintain the status quo, but do something more.
So what you're proposing is, in order to get my voice heard, what I will do is help put into office a candidate who is dedicated to destroying.
Yeah, no, you've already made this argument.
Human life. That'll
So
help me get my voice heard.
yeah, no. So Chomsky strawmans. Chomsky continues to say, "Oh, well, if you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for Trump." Going off that like doesn't even make any sense. Twilight Zone, Friday the 13th type logic.
No, I'm sorry, it won't.
Professor, I wouldn't argue that I am helping Trump. I would argue that if the Democratic Party, if Joe Biden as a candidate were unwilling to concede these very common sense concessions that would help him in electoral context and would also be the right thing to do, that it is he who would be enabling Trump, and that framing the onus as decidedly on the voter instead of the politician who's in a position of power to actually affect the outcome is wrongly doing a kind of voter shaming that continues to have the effect of suppressing the vote among people who are, I think, very valiantly asking for a better world. And yes, using the vote, the only real tool they have to directly communicate with their elected officials to influence.
Totally wrong. That's the establishment view, and you shouldn't buy into it.
Wait, it's the establishment view that it's the politicians in power that affects political and economic policy. And no, it's actually the voter, it's the individual. So wait, no. What the fuck is he talking about? This doesn't even make any sense. Oh, I'm gonna blame the individual for not fucking falling in line. I'm gonna blame lefties for not wanting to vote for this god-awful candidate. Like, dude, this is absolutely ridiculous. No, this is exactly what the status quo is doing right now. This is what the Democrats are doing right now. They're fucking telling you to fall in line behind their candidate, and if they lose, they're gonna blame you. They're gonna blame the voter. They're gonna blame Bernie Sanders, Ralph Nader. Like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Vote is not the only tool you have.
Well, one of the only. I didn't say exclusively.
It's the least of the tools that you have. That's the establishment view. You're a spectator, not a participant. Do the vote, go home.
No. That is very much not the establishment view. Actually, I mean, it kind of is. Like, let me gather my thoughts real quick. I don't even know how to respond to that because my mother is playing beautiful music downstairs. But anyways, okay. So all I'm going to do is reaffirm that the electoral and democratic process in the United States is total bullshit. From the bottom up, the deck is stacked against our odds in their favor. The system is designed to facilitate the needs of the capitalist class. As I've stated prior, in the past, property qualifications barred most people from running for popular office. And right now we might not have property qualifications, but we do have campaign finance. You can't get your name out there without money. Well, as it turns out, the people with all the money are the ones that, are the big corporations and the billionaire class, the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, etc. They're the ones with all the campaign finance money. They're the ones who can pay all these lobbyists, to bribe the politicians to lobby the government in their favor. And no, I mean, even if you were able to get like a Bernie Sanders type candidate into office, you people realize that Wall Street would just do a capital strike and they would just deliberately crash the economy in protest to any policy that he does, and you guys would see the forces of reaction manifest at best in the form of a capital strike and Congress blocking literally everything he tries to get by, and at worst in a military coup d'etat where people hear on the radio that Sanders has been ordered to leave the White House, and now there is, the military is going to rein things in and take charge. That's also a possibility. And that may sound unrealistic, but No, it's really not. Like, they were planning on cooing FDR for his mild, basic bitch reforms in the 1930s. Like, there was a legitimate coup plot that was on the table in Wall Street against FDR. You guys can look that up on your own.
The real politics is constantly working to change the conditions under which political figures will be compelled to shift their views. That's real politics. Every once in a while, an event comes up called an election. You have to take 10 minutes to decide, am I going to keep the worst guy off, or is it not worth bothering? Often it's not worth bothering. This time it is very much worth it. We've got to get rid of him. I'll take 5 minutes to do it. Then I'll go back to the kind of real politics.
There's nothing uniquely evil about Donald Trump. I repeat myself, there is nothing uniquely evil about Donald J. Trump. All right? He's just logical continuation of policies that were established years, decades prior. All right? Capital, or the dictatorship of capital, exists to uphold private property, the market, and the capitalist system as a whole. So it logically follows that what we really need is to build the institutions that will go on to become the organs of the new state, a new state apparatus of our own. That is the overthrow of the previous state and the establishment of a new one. Unfortunately, we are nowhere near at that point. We are decades away from a revolutionary situation here in the imperial core. So what needs to be done, I would say what needs to be done in the medium is, rather than just staying complicit, because most people don't vote anyways, most people are just completely withdrawn from the political process in general. How about, instead of just telling people to go out and vote, you tell them to join a union, or to get organized with their neighbors, or to try to do some community work nearby and struggle with people on an individual basis, because, a fucking plumber or Dick down the road isn't going to have time to read Das Kapital. He's busy working 50 to 60 hours a week to support his family. No, instead what you do is you get to know these people and you work with them, and you just find things that people are agitated about amongst the system, and that's how you bring them into the fray. You find the issues that affect people personally, and you work with them on that, and you do community work, and you struggle, because there's something to say about struggling with someone individually. Like, let's say you're at a protest. I know some guys who were at a BLM protest downtown a few months ago, and there was a mass arrest. It was a constitutional violation of the First Amendment. 300 people stayed at this protest, at this sit down, and there was a mass arrest of 300 people. One girl almost fucking died because she couldn't get the insulin that she needed. She was diabetic and they wouldn't give her insulin, and they detained 300 protesters illegally in a parking lot. There's something to say when you're put in a situation where you're struggling with other people, and you guys are facing a common suffering, a common pain against an outside force. There's something about that builds solidarity amongst one another. There's something about that builds solidarity and camaraderie, and that's what we really need to focus on in the immediate time. And you're not going to do that by just telling people to go out and vote. Even from the harm reduction argument, I would wager that Biden does more harm to our movement than Trump, because what happens when Biden becomes elected? What happens when Biden becomes president, guys? I'll tell you what happens. Obama 2.0. All of his crimes, all the horrible shit that he does will just get brushed under the rug, won't be talked about at all. People are going to think everything's going back to normal. There's going to be like a sense of normality, and people are going to become once again disconnected and not care about politics, because they think, we've got a good liberal in power, he's doing things right, and he's certainly running the imperial core in a more competent way than Trump. Trump is destabilizing the fuck out of the imperial core. But what I'm trying to say is, at least with Trump, we know who our enemy is. With Trump, people are united and agitated against a common enemy. And what needs to be done is that needs to be taken and harnessed into, you know, a deeper, broader understanding of why the system sucks. I mean, really. Because most people don't like Trump. Most people aren't going to like Biden either. And let me tell you something else, guys. Here's the terrifying part of all of this that Chomsky's not taking into account, is that the conditions that gave us Trump are going to give us the future conditions for Trump. Because at this point, the Republican Party is hollowed out. They've got nothing to offer people. People are struggling. People are suffering. People are hurting, you know, etc. Well, what they're going to look for in Trump's place, because let's face it, guys, at this point, Donald Trump is the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is Donald Trump. So at this point, they're going to look for another Trump. They're going to look for another zany, quirky, charismatic, authoritarian strongman figure to replace Donald Trump. So what we're going to get over the years as we march further and further to the right is effectively, we're basically going to get like a legitimate fascist in charge of the United States, because Lord knows neoliberals like Biden are going to ignore the issues and the woes of working class people. But then you're going to get a Republican coming along, or it could even be a Democrat. I'm just saying, like, you can't just ignore the woes and issues of everyday working class people, of the American people, and expect things just to go normally. Eventually, someone's going to come along to proclaim to care about those issues and woes, but, you know, they're going to blame the Lekantian other. They're going to blame XYZ minority group or XYZ group in power, the elites, the Jews, whatever. They're going to find some scapegoat to distract from the contradictions of the system itself, and people are going to fall in line because they're so broken and that they don't know anything else, and because they have someone who actually seems to be a populist, who seems to represent them. That's how we got Donald Trump in the first place. Biden ain't no populist. These motherfuckers are going out to vote for him because he's not Trump. And then he doesn't change anything. And all it's going to do is make people even more discontent with things as are. So they're going to trend in two directions, socialism and fascism. And the status quo will back fascism when push comes to shove, because private property, or fascism, is fundamentally not a threat to private property like socialism is. So by staying complicit in the system, maybe in the short term we could do minor, meaningless harm reduction, but all that's going to happen is the issues in the country are going to get swept under the rug, and we're going to end up with another Trump down the line. That's all I'm trying to say here.
Politics, which changes consciousness, awareness, environment, sets the conditions under which any populace, the choice is either that or voting against him, and then going back to the activist work that changes conditions and will compel them to move towards more progressive ends. That's the choice. You don't concentrate on the vote. The vote is the least of politics. That's establishment propaganda.
Professor, you mentioned earlier that activism has moved Biden to the left over the course of the general election campaign. That's curious to me, because what I've seen is Biden resisting moving to the left. One famous note, out of the DNC Unity Commission, the Sanders-Biden Unity Commission, one of the recommendations was...
So you look at the campaign, take, say, climate change, the most important thing. His program is way to the left of any previous one. Certainly to the left of what the DNC wants.
Bull to the fucking shit. He isn't going to end fracking. He isn't going to curtail fracking. He's not going to end fossil fuel subsidies. He's going to continue to get us involved in regime change wars. You've seen Biden's foreign policy issues, like his stances on foreign policy. He's a fucking war hawk. Like, I'm about to show you guys, one second. You guys want to know what fucking America's foreign policy is? I'll show you it in a single YouTube clip. Here we go. This is fucking America's foreign policy. Get ready, guys. God damn it! Why the fuck do they have to pop up recommendations at the? Well, you get the point, all right. Point is, America is the big dick, evil, unstoppable monster that is sociopathic, who takes what he wants. Like, if you know, like seriously, if America were a superhero, it would be fucking Homelander. But anyways. No, seriously though, Biden will be a war hawk, and he isn't going to pull us out of any of these wars. And we're going to continue to get involved in this military adventurism for resources. And the next big resource is going to be water. When we start having serious fucking droughts, when all the clean drinking water is going away, you're going to start to see water become more and more commodified, and you're going to see companies charging rent for something as basic as water, you know. And then the clouds are going to get, or the atmosphere is going to get more polluted. So, you know, you can maybe commodify, have some Pokemon gas masks, have people walking around with dystopic ventilators and shit, you know, just a regular, wonderful American life. And we're just gonna, you know, enjoy the fucking post-truth era, as I call it.
Calling for nowhere near far enough, but much farther to the left. I can quote it for you if you want, you can look it up. Same on other issues. Not as far as I would like, but it has been moved. Same.
Bernie Sanders was the compromise, all right? Not Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders was the guy who had a super far left platform relative to the status quo, who, when put in power, will at best enact one or two major reforms that people are overwhelmingly pleased with, be it scheduling down or taking marijuana off of the drug scheduling list, ramping down our military spending, implementing at worst or at best a public option. I could see him getting a public option. I don't really see single-payer healthcare happening if Bernie takes power, but I think we would get a good public option with a Bernie Sanders. Long story short, Bernie Sanders was the goddamn compromise, and we lost that when he decided to cup to the DNC, because he cares more about his relationships with his establishment friends than he does about the American people. Oh, my good friend, Joe Biden! Oh God, help me, Bernie! Help me! I've been bitten by a poisonous black widow. I need to be taken to the hospital. I will take you to the hospital. But first, after playing this game of Yahtzee with my good friend Joe Biden. Oh God, it's been like 10 minutes, Bernie. Are you done yet? No, it's starting to burn. I'm not finished playing Yahtzee with Joe Biden. Now I'm going to go help him solve this crossword puzzle. The venom is running through my veins and starting to necrotize the flesh. Please. And then like 15 minutes later, he's fucking dead. That's Bernie Sanders, dude. Total piece of shit. Not just a Rosa killer, but fucking traitor to our movement, and he should be called out for this. But anyways,
Mr. Ruth, everyone in the past, Lyndon Johnson, didn't go as far as I would have liked on civil rights, but he went farther than anything in the past. Richard Nixon didn't go as far as I wanted on protecting workers' rights, but he went to the left under pressure. That's how politics works. Yes,
really?
It won't be as far as we like.
Really? Richard Nixon? That's your example of, like, you know, going to the left? Oh my God. Richard Nixon locked up hippies and black and brown people over smoking the wrong plants. Fuck Richard Nixon. Oh yeah, and Red Dundonian. Take it easy, bud. Good having you with me, comrade. And anywho, I think now would be a good time to shout out my Patreons. So I have two Patreons here. Their names are Kyle and Roman. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for donating to my Patreon. Kyle Rapp and Roman Alexander. I really appreciate it. You guys are golden. You're keeping me golden. And you have my word. I will have a scripted video out for you this week. And I will have at least 2 scripted videos out for the rest of October. And for November and December, things are going to get very difficult because I'm going to be working a lot of overtime. I'm talking like 50 to 60 hours a week. I'll try to get some scripted content out for November and December. I'm just saying don't count on it being more than like maybe 2 videos a month at the most. I will still continue to live stream, but yes, once again, thank you to my Patreons. Let's go ahead and get back to it, shall we?
But we keep working. Not it didn't do as far as I'd like. Therefore, I'll support the worst guy. Remember, those are the choices. You have a choice of supporting Trump or voting against it.
This is a total false dichotomy. Like, seriously. It's like, I get that the Democrats are the only quote-unquote valid candidate on the ballot box, but that's only because people like you are telling everyone that it has to be that way and that they are the only one. Like, let me tell you something, man. If people were building actual dual power in third parties, like decades ago, and were actually doing the work, I mean, assuming the American left wouldn't have been as badly crushed. I mean, it would have been tough to do during the Red Scare, admittedly, but still. If every fuckhead like Chomsky and the Radlibs, not naming any names here, were to actually tell people to go out and vote and support third parties, guarantee you that's hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people that would be going out, voting, canvassing, campaigning, and supporting those third parties. Because the kind of people that watch these types of YouTube channels and knows who these kind of people are can at the very least be encouraged to be politically active, such as myself. Anyways, one moment. I do have a question. Why is Jason Unruh not here? The reason why Jason isn't here is, I don't know. I tried reaching out to him over Twitter a number of times. I reached out to him an hour before the stream was scheduled, and we had this worked out originally. Like, we were supposed to stream at 3 o'clock, but I waited for a half hour and he never got back to me. And let me go ahead and see if he got back to me now. Yeah, he never got back to me. I'm sorry. That's the reason why he's not here. I apologize that Jason wasn't able to make it. And otherwise, I would love to have his commentary right now over this. I completely agree. If I was Supreme Leader of the United States, let's say, you know, I'm the premier, I think my first move would be to give the Black Hills back to the Lakota Sioux and to declare various regions, like their various autonomous enclaves that are like separate from the United States. They would be given, they'd be allowed to write their own constitution, do politics and economics however they want, you know, while giving them some subsidiaries to help encourage and spur economic growth and developments. And, you know, let them self-determine for themselves how they want to do things. Do they want to go back to the ways of their ancestors? Do they want to be capitalist? Or do they want to be Chads like us and go socialist? Interestingly enough, Native Americans, like old Native American society, like the matriarchal the matriarchal leadership of like the Lakota Sioux and so on was actually very similar to communism. Like, they didn't have a concept of like, at least, you know, land as property. They didn't really have a conception of property rights in general. That was sort of imposed on them by the United States. Goods were distributed according to need. Everyone just had to contribute and work, do their daily tasks. And I'm not trying to sit here and glorify, you know, clan communism. I mean, obviously, they fought one another. They went to war with each other, had disputes over land. They were human beings like you and me. They had their flaws and their shortcomings. But what was done to them like 2 centuries, 3 centuries ago was absolutely fucking wrong. And I definitely believe they deserve some restitution for that. Jason Unruh. He is the old guard communist of YouTube. And I'm happy to say that I'm on speaking terms with him. I really like Jason. Me and him we're friends now, which is pretty fucking awesome. Anyways. So let's watch a little bit more of this and then we'll go ahead and close out because I have to do some, I have to run some errands later. And I was originally planning on having the stream run for about 2 hours, but tragically, yeah, I guess it just ain't gonna happen, comrades.
You don't have any other choice in November 3rd. No, take a look at Biden's program. It actually moved enough to the left.
We've already addressed this.
Are right in denying the crisis of climate. There's plenty of other things. Let's just keep to that. Trump is alone in the world in pressing the accelerator towards disaster soon.
Okay, so let's talk about the Paris Climate Accords. Those climate accords are just a formal agreement among nations to like gradually reduce their climate or their CO2 output and carbon footprint. And strides are definitely being made. The issue is that they're being made within the context of capitalism. And as I've stated before, we've already done irreparable damage to the environment. We're already locked in for like 1.5 degrees Celsius warming by 2050. At best, we could hope to curtail that and be under 2 degrees Celsius. But the planet's already warmed up by about a Celsius. We're going to be 1.5 Celsius if we cut them within the parameters of what was within the climate accords. But based on what we're seeing now, it's looking more like it's going to be 2 degrees centigrade, which is already going to be rather disastrous. And we're going to be having just a heads up, guys, we're going to be having a blue ocean event next decade. Not this one, but by the 2030s, 2040s, we're going to start having blue ocean events. And that's when shit's really going to spiral out of control. That's when the real fun begins. But nah, Trump and Biden, great man theory to think you can vote out the fossil fuel industrial complex. They're in it for more growth, more development, and more profits. All right. And the truly viable alternatives to fossil fuels like nuclear fission are not profitable for the simple reason that you can't exploit labor power in the same way. There is a great deal of human labor time that goes into the extraction of fossil fuels, as well as the construction of an individual solar panel or wind. The problem is that wind and solar are not fuel efficient or energy dense like fossil fuels are. They are profitable, but nuclear is not profitable because not nearly as much socially necessary human labor time is involved in the production of nuclear fission, not to mention all the laws and regulations you have to follow to prevent a meltdown. So it's a long shot, but the only thing that's really going to curtail our fossil fuel usage by 2050 in a meaningful capacity to where we actually do achieve a carbon neutral footprint is Soviet-style planning. Like, we would need to introduce 5-year plans. You see, this Green New Deal shit would have been viable if you go back in time 35, 40 years and do it in the 1980s. Now you've got yourself a viable path if you do it back then, like 30, 40 years ago. The problem is that we've already made the planet that much hotter. So really the only thing that's going to save us at this point is if we reintroduce central planned economies, which looks like it's not going to happen. So long story short, to put it mildly, we're pretty fucked.
That's a crucial issue. Do we want to support that? Or do we want to kick him out?
Yeah, we've already been through this. Biden isn't going to do shit.
To his lack of respect for basic civil rights, Fourth Amendment rights, some of the most foundational rights we have as Americans, that being told that Donald Trump is incrementally worse than him speaks to a bigger systemic issue.
Not incrementally, vastly worse.
Well, if we're talking about something like stop and frisk, it's a real potato situation with the two of them, given exactly how oppressive Bloomberg's reign in your.
If you guys really want to know what a Biden administration would look like, it's going to be to the right of Barack Obama, honestly, because with Kamala Harris as his running mate, I have no doubt in my mind that she is going to be the ones taking reins, sort of like Dick Cheney with George Bush back in the 2000s. I have no doubt in my mind that she's really going to be the one taking reins and reining things in, and she is going to aggressively expand the police state. Are you fucking kidding me? These protests this year have the bourgeoisie fucking terrified. They are going to expand the police state. They're going to try to get more cops on the ground, give them more armor and toys and more shit that they need to beat up and break down protests and keep us atomized and isolated.
City was.
Oh yeah, and they made this analogy between Bloomberg and Trump. Like, if it were Bloomberg, should we still support him? And Chomsky's just like, yes. And I don't know.
do take an issue like that. I would argue that climate is a similar issue, especially given that the way climate change operates, even if you are significantly better than another person on climate, if you aren't structuring your climate programs that it prevents us from reaching the 1.5 and then the 2 degrees Celsius temperature rates at which there are cataclysmic waterfall effects throughout the climate, then your good effort doesn't help us very much. You're trying harder, but it doesn't get us to the place.
You're asking why do we live in a capitalist society that we have not been able to overthrow?
Well, not necessarily. I think it might
1 degree centigrade and 4 degrees centigrade, which Trump is driving for. Yes, he is. We have the documents for it. That means cataclysm. Okay? Total cataclysm. All these other issues don't arise. So that's only one point. So the question,
we're already like what, half a degree, 1 degree hotter. We're already losing like marine life, bird and insect life at an exponential rate. Like, I'm not gonna lie, guys, this is probably the only October that I've ever lived in my entire life where I can rock a fucking tank top in public without wearing a jacket, you know, where I'm walking around in flip-flops because it's like 70, 75 degrees out. So like I've said, we're already pretty fucked, and I don't really see a Biden presidency doing anything about that. So I keep repeating myself. I'm just gonna skip to like further in, see if he says anything else. Otherwise, I'm gonna make my closing statements and then I'm gonna answer some questions.
it is on November 3rd.
environmental protests with the climate change movement, et cetera.
Oh yeah, the Extinction Rebellion, the fucking astroturfed, petite bourgeois, fucking climate protests. Totally just astroturfed by NGOs. The same NGOs responsible for sponsoring color revolutions in the third world.
That Joe Biden still hasn't moved, and I don't want to center it exclusively on him, obviously. I hear you say we can push him when he's in office and that work has to continue. And
yeah, we can push him left. We can push him left, even though he's got absolutely no incentive to listen to us. Correct. I know she's not saying that, but that's Chomsky's point.
See that. I appreciate that argument, but I'm wondering what indication there is of that strategy being effective, given that we're seeing him show such disrespect to the...
Oh yeah, no, I see. XR is so culty. You know, like a lot of there are like some left-wing tendencies, but their leadership actively eschews an anti-capitalist message and pushes for the Green New Deal. Like they are not radical at all. Like what their solution is the Green New Deal as prescribed and written by NATO and the EU. Like they didn't come up with their own Green New Deal. This is something that like the European Union wrote, and they're pushing for it. And that is about as far as you can get from a radical movement, mind you. This is nowhere near radical. And mind you, their methods of protest and resistance are really fucking stupid. They've effectively taken the worst aspects of the civil rights movement and turned them into their most common protest tactics. Like, hold on a second. Let me show you guys something. You guys are not going to believe what you're about to fucking see. Here we go. Yeah! Yeah, this is resistance right here. Leave your mark. Spray paint your hand to a government building, and then take your red fucking hand and peacefully turn yourself into the police. Wow, so radical. So radical, very big brain, very, very big brain move. Amazing, wonderful. This is totally gonna get the fossil fuel. This is totally gonna take the fossil fuel industrial complex down. This is totally gonna take on the military industrial complex. This is totally going to take on the Wall Street or the billionaire class. This is really gonna get us into the meat and potatoes of solving all of our environmental woes, right, guys? Fucking spray painting your hand to a wall and then turning yourself into the cops. Oh my. Oh Lord. You know what? Oh my God. I don't even know what to say about this. You know what? I'm starting to think right-wingers might have a point. I'm starting to think when conservatives say that communism is a utopia and it's impossible, there's a small part of me, just a little part of me, that thinks they might just be right. And that people are too fucking stupid for communism. But fortunately, the little revolution in me and the optimist in me prevails.
Left in such a blasé lack of concern for whether or not they will vote for him, whether or not they will support him, whether or not, with the fact that they are lying down in the street and risking their lives in protest. If he is so indifferent at this moment, what hope is there that
lying down in the street and letting themselves get arrested, that is,
down the road, that he will be more receptive to these goals?
To do what we want, have a decision which will take 10 minutes. Do we help make the situation much harder for us to do what we want? Or do we get rid of the impediments to doing what we want and then do the best we can? That's the choice. It's a 10-minute choice. For the left, the traditional left, not the contemporary left, which seems to be caught up in the establishment propaganda, but for the traditional left, your activism continues. The questions you're raising are the right ones. Keep at them all the time. You take off if you decide whether it's worth taking off a few minutes to prevent making our task incomparably harder. And the answer to that is yes. Take off 10 minutes. Prevent it from getting incomparably harder.
Without confronting capital.
But you didn't understand the comment that I made. If we assume that capitalism is unmodifiable to be and the institutions of capitalism of profit making, ignoring everything else, if we assume that that's unchangeable, we can say goodbye to each other. But we don't assume that. We don't have capitalism.
Well,
we have a variety of state capitalism, which can take many different forms.
All right. So he's not entirely wrong that the system can be amended if adequate political will can be mustered. But my issue is if we're gonna muster the political will to try and change aspects about the system, core aspects about the system that have evolved and emerged as a method to cope with the falling rate of profit and declining, profit rates in the economic crashes and so on, then why don't we just put our energy into building socialism? Why don't we just put our energy into developing class consciousness and actually doing revolution? If we're really going to talk about mustering the political will for real social change, and we're about a half hour in, and I don't really feel like going any further because I feel like Chomsky is just going to keep repeating himself. So I think it's time for some closing thoughts. What I will say, comrades, is I apologize that Jason could not make it. But long story short, lesser evil voting are the politics of a defeatist. They're the politics of a coward. It's the politics of somebody who says, okay, so because we don't have the movement built up, because we don't have the numbers, because we don't have the clout or the political will, to achieve our ends and our goals, we just got to fall in line and vote for this right-wing candidate who doesn't support our interests, who isn't actually going to fight for us, and who isn't going to implement any of the change that we want just because we think he might be a little bit better than the other candidate. They're both reactionary candidates. They're both total shit. Yeah, the thing is that even if you did get Biden in, let's say you do that, you could get a little bit of harm reduction done, maybe a little bit, but all that's going to happen is the liberal media is just going to sweep all of Biden's crimes under the rug. All they're going to do is just ignore all the horrible shit Biden's doing, like what they did with Obama. They only bring it up if it's a Republican because the Republicans are supposed to be the spooky boogeyman that everybody is supposed to vote against. That's like the main selling point of the Democratic Party at this point. That's all they have. But what we have is actual change, actual policy issues, and reform that people want, you know. And that's the reason why you're better off throwing your weight behind the Green Party. Because, you know, like I said, while we're on this topic of voting morally, if we're really going to talk about doing the morally right thing, how about we stick to our guns and fight for our principles and fight for what's actually right, rather than fucking bending over and cucking to a capitalist, like, right-wing bourgeois candidate that literally wants to see us destroyed and wants to see us oppressed and suppressed, because that's what Biden is. He fucking helped write the Patriot Act. In fact, he was the architect of the Patriot Act, many of the tough on crime bill and legislation in the 1980s and 90s that is still fucking over black and brown communities to this day. Biden is as far of a champion of the working class as you can possibly get. Not to mention, he's an absolute war hawk. He supported the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He was in favor of the bombing of Libya. He straight up says he wants to coup Cuba and Venezuela. You know, he wants to ramp up aggression with Iran, ramp up aggression with China, expand the police state. There's nothing really redeemable about Biden when you actually look at what he wants to do on paper. He's not going to implement single-payer healthcare. He's not going to implement any meaningful reform of any kind. So why even fucking bother? There's so little difference between the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate that it doesn't really fucking matter. So you're better off, rather than just staying complicit in a system that does not serve you, you should serve and build a system that does, because down the line, that is going to matter, guys. We are going to need to be doing this work today, because years down the line, when we've built critical mass, we'll actually be able to challenge the status quo, and we'll hopefully be able to go on and actually re-spark class politics and class consciousness in the way Bernie Sanders failed to. So stop participating and staying complicit in the Democratic Party's bullshit. Support a third party. You know, get involved, get active in your community. And that's really all I have to say on that topic. Anyways, we'll answer a couple questions here now. Starting with this one. Will you have Red Scare on anytime? I would love to. I'll hit him up over Discord, and I'll go ahead and give him a call after this, and I'll see about having him on sometime. I'd like to get Comrade Net, Jason, and Red Scare all onto one call. I'd like to eventually go on to maybe even having Hakeem or Caleb Maupin, you know, some other big YouTubers on sometime. But, you know, I gotta build my audience through, you know, my own steam. I can't just fucking chase clout from other YouTubers. But I would like to have him on sometime. Well, yeah, and he's made them all fall in line. Now they're all following a single authoritarian strongman oligarch. Like I said, I'll invite him on probably after this stream. All right. All right. I wouldn't necessarily say that. There is revolutionary potential out there, but it's few and far between. As I've stated on one of my previous streams, I do believe there's a lot of potential in India for a revolution. They've got a lot of communists. It's not really a stable government. Same with I think Indonesia has potential as well. There are a few other countries. I think France has some potential, because from what I've heard, there are Maoists in France that were organizing the Yellow Vest protests. So I think maybe not now, but a couple decades down the line. Like, the left is in a rut right now, guys. And like I said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done today. But remember that there are going to be periods of time when nothing is going on. And then there are going to be periods of time when a lot is going on. Is that how the phrase goes? There are weeks when decades happen. There are decades when when nothing happens. Lenin said something of the sort, but things are changing very rapidly. There is a growing amount of anti-establishment sentiments and a growing amount of discontent with the status quo. Things are changing very rapidly. There's more protests and strikes than ever before, and our job is to harness that energy into something productive. I think you're talking about when I showed XR, the Red-Handed Rebellion. Yeah, no. No, totally. Turning yourself into the cops is totally praxis, dude. Trust me, bro. Chomsky with reverb sounds like some kind of ancient spirit being painfully brought back from the other side. I'm sorry, but I'm not a big fan of Chomsky, but it's just so depressing to see someone like a left-wing intellectual like him reduced to this, you know, just being a Democratic partisan shill. And it's just so sad because he's such a huge influence for so many people. Extinction Rebellion. It's the absolute state, comrade. The absolute state. Let's go down to the bottom. According to Third Worldism, the revolution can come from anywhere, but most likely in the Third World. I would agree with that. I would think so. The issue is, while it's more likely to happen in the Third World, just look what's been transpiring like in the Middle East and in South America for decades. There hasn't really been one country that's taken a hard left turn, that's tried to do something different, that hasn't been actively fucked with by the United States or the CIA or, you know, Western intelligence agencies. They all get sabotaged and destroyed. And then if they don't get destroyed, they have to survive the if they can manage to survive the reactionary onslaught from within, then that country is going to be faced with an ungodly amount of pressure in the form of sanctions, trade embargo by the United States. So that's the reason why I think, for pragmatic reasons, we should fight for revolution in the First World, because people in the First World like are suffering too. I feel like a lot of like the mindset of like people who've read Settlers, where you just have like the mythology of the white proletariat, where, you know, white people are inherently reactionary because of their wealth and privilege. I feel like that situation is changing very rapidly because income inequality is exponentially increasing, and there is a scale of immiseration taking place in the United States that hasn't been really ever before seen, you know, from the drug abuse to the crime and the violence, the suicidality, alienation is worse than ever before. Like, people in the First World are suffering now more than ever before, and that's not about to change. We just need to find the issues that people are suffering from and tie it back to the capitalist system. But I'm afraid when revolution does come to the First World, I feel like it is going to be too late. I feel like we're going to be past the point of no return, at least when it comes to the environmental chaos. And I don't know. What do you think were the biggest achievements and failures of Eastern countries like the DDR and Czechoslovakia? Well, I can't speak about the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, but I can speak of the DDR's biggest achievements and shortcomings. The DDR grew substantially faster than the Republic of Germany. They also paid the overwhelming majority of the war debt off. They produced plenty assortments of scientists, engineers, great minds. They produced some great authors and athletes. They were like one of the pinnacles of civilization, and they were actually a really nice place to live by the 1970s, 1980s. The biggest problem with the DDR was its declining population. People were either fleeing or they were just emigrating to other countries. It was very difficult for them to keep people in their domestic borders, and it's not entirely their fault, because there were tactics done by the United States and really West Germany to do like brain drain, bring in all their high-skilled labor, which is why they had to erect the wall and keep people from leaving. But their population was perpetually declining, and I don't really know how they could have addressed that, but that was really just their biggest issue, was just keeping people inside East Germany without having to do so by force. I understand why they had to do so by force. And of course, the other reason why they built the wall was, of course, it was termed the anti-fascist wall, because all of the Nazis on the West German front got integrated into the new government, and they just started sponsoring terrorist attacks in East Germany. I believe there was a rebellion in the 1950s that had to be put down by the German military. But anyways, as was I, comrade. I actually used to be a fairly big fan of Noam Chomsky. This was back during my anarchist days. And I'm not really a fan of Chomsky anymore, largely because he's just got some really bad takes. I mean, he's the typical, oh, you know, well, actually existing socialism, that's not real socialism, that's just state capitalism, you know? Because for a lot of Western leftists, they internalize bougie propaganda, and then they take the stance where they denounce actually existing socialism, because it's an easier stance to take than actually sticking up for its legacy. And that's where I come in, and that's where we come in, because we actually know the truth about the history, and we're not just, you know, anti-communist hacks. And down the line, I think it's going to help us out a lot in the long term, because we're going to have to be really patient. We're going to lose until we don't lose. So, you know. Yeah, and there was not really a lot you could do, because West Berlin was sort of like the Potemkin city that Westerners and the America is always accusing the DPRK's Pyongyang of being, just being a Potemkin city, but that actually was West Germany. Not to mention, you had like America basically coming in and pumping all this money to rebuild West Germany. West Germany didn't even face the rot of the damage, though. Most of the damage was suffered on the Eastern Front. So East Germany had to build everything back up from nothing, and they successfully did that before the dissolution of the USSR, and then they lost all their allies. And it's funny because there are polls that show that most people that grew up in East Germany actually prefer a life in the DDR to modern day Germany. They just said life was better under communism. Yeah, really, who can even watch Chomsky? Well, for me, the switch was actually from Michael Parenti. Parenti is, all in all, a better historian and a better left-winger than Chomsky. Parenti's analysis is on point, largely because Parenti is an actual Marxist. Like, he truly understands what Marxism is. And he's a Marxist-Leninist. Like, that's the thing. A lot of people stop at Marx. Like, a lot of orthodox Marxists, they don't investigate beyond Marx. So all they know is critique of capitalism. They know why capitalism sucks, but they don't really know how to do revolution and build communism. And that's where Leninism, Maoism, Guevarism, and all these other tendencies, like all these other derivations of Marxism, Leninism come in. So that's like the biggest issue with Western leftists, particularly that of like the likes of Richard D. Wolff and Chomsky. And you'll even see this with other big name left-wing YouTubers whom I shall not name. They have a decent critique of capitalism, but they don't really know how to build the alternative. Anyways, we're running at about a minute and 30 minutes. So I just want to say thank you guys for being here, and thank you for being on my stream, or joining me today. And I don't really know when I'm going to reach out to Jason next. I'm going to try and reach out and maybe see about doing a stream with him this week, but it's probably going to be earlier into the day, around 1 or 2 o'clock, either during a Tuesday or a Thursday. Jason's got a very busy schedule, and after today, I'm going to have a very busy schedule, but we'll see. Anyways, toodles. Talk to you guys.